we were keen on doing something that was based in Britain. Like, we're an independent studio, we can set the game wherever we want, right? Oftentimes what happens is though, when a game is set in the UK, it's one of two places. It's either London, right, as you'll see in lots of games, or it's a quaint little village in the home counties in southern England somewhere. And you don't really get much else. So for me personally, being a guy who's just on the outskirts of Manchester, was like, how about we explore this? How about we see how this could adapt? So you'll see in the game, there's a lot of bit kind of like red brick terrace housing, right? There's a lot of memories even from like my own past in there in terms of locations. And we can take that risk and we can make that play and we can create worlds that look a little bit unique in comparison to maybe stuff that's been in the UK before.
So the characters all live in England and we really wanted to reflect that in the world around them, and the story and the tone is reflected in the world and the environment. We do a lot of visual storytelling with props, with places that the characters go, and it's really important that the relationship between the character stories and where they're going and where they're interacting works really well together.
Largely we did a lot of kind of doing virtual walks, or at least I did virtual walks on like Google Maps, Street View. Also just pulling a lot from like my own childhood. I grew up in like, you know, suburbs, and they're all quite similar. They have bits where, you know, you can feel different time periods kind of like stopping, and you can notice things about them that haven't gone away yet. So
we have very recognizable street signs and road signs, and there's a level that's set in a pub. So that's something you don't see very much, especially in a strategy game. Really simple things, just like the toppers on the top of the wall. They used to be this like bright blue color. They were quite fun, I guess, and almost cartoony. And I actually wanted to bring those down, make them more of that concrete, kind of ugly, but kind of you know, it's part of the look, it's part of the aesthetic of like UK suburbs to some degree. And I wanted those things to be really recognizable. There was definitely a pushback from Chris, our lead artist, about wanting to put a phone box in the game. He was really anti it, didn't want it. I put one in and he was like, I was wrong. The phone box is like perfect. And it's one of those like 90s phone boxes. So it's not like one of those ones that you might see when you go to London and just kind of be like, oh, it's a very classic design. It's that very like 90s plasticky, kind of tacky looking thing. And I just love things like that because they're very distinctly like of the UK.
I was also really keen on trying to show a different type of accent, and to be honest, a different type of kind of social class as well, right? Again, oftentimes in games, and especially British games, incredibly posh, well-spoken accents and people. And for us, it was great to be able to take that risk to show different types. So Desta lives in a tiny little terrace house, right? And their mates are all kind of northern working class town people. So accent-wise, that's been interesting to get right. The entire cast is from kind of like the Greater Manchester area pretty much. So being able to appropriately cast people based on where they're from and their kind of their own background in that way. And oftentimes we've hit a lot of those notes in terms of sexual orientation and family heritage and all that kind of stuff as well. So being super accurate as much as we can do. One thing that's been important to get right though is how much slang do we put in there? So between myself, Ro and Jenny, looking after a lot of the writing, it's okay to put some slang in there as long as say an American can infer what that word or that phrase might mean. So we've not gone super over the top, but we've tried to be as honest and as true as possible to speaking from that area, which is a really difficult thing to get right.
Dust off your sequin jacket because I've bagged us guest list at this rave in town later.
Stand still, will you? You're honestly worse than Fran.
We wanted to have really distinctive colour theming, not just for individual characters, but also the difference between Desta's team and the enemy teams. So Desta's team always have elements of blue in them. So Desta has a blue jacket, it's a very like distinctive part of their design. Once you recruit Desta's friends onto their team, they also inherit some of Desta's blue color palette. But it's not just blanket blue for everyone. You always have an element of another color in there, or a mixture of the color palettes. Whereas the enemies have more oranges, purples, reds, like a toxic waste palette a little bit. They're a little bit gross looking, and trying to like control it so it still looks nice. It still is like an appealing palette to look at, but really pushing the edges of that. So we also didn't want to have it just so it's just plain blue and plain red, so it feels like Team Fortress or something like that. It would make the game feel too video gamey, which funny enough is something we don't want to do. We don't want it to look like a normal tactics game and have a lot of the same visual tropes. We want it to have its own voice.